Media recognition from Bloomberg, Reuters, recycling trade publications. Patented process for 100% recovery of critical metals, including cobalt, lithium, nickel, manganese, aluminum. American Manganese is focused on recycling lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles. American Manganese trades on the TSX Venture, AMY, the US, AMYZF, and Frankfurt 2AM. For more information, visit AmericanManganeseInc.com or phone me, Larry Ray, at 778-574-4444.
You're listening to HowStreet.com radio, available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. Welcome to HowStreet.com radio, the online source for market opinions. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is Tim Cyclesman Wood, editor of Cycles News and Views on CyclesMan.com. Welcome back to the show, Tim.
Jim, thanks as always for having me.
Tim, the infrastructure bill in the U.S., $1.2 billion. Of course, they can't even agree on that final number. It's still a lot of money, more than you and I spend on lunch together.
Trillion, Jim. Trillion. 1.2 trillion.
Trillion. See? Just saying that number.
You can't even say it. Exactly. It's so big.
Yeah, it's so big. Well, anyway, so we have the Biden infrastructure bill, but there's been other trillion-dollar spending things happening under President Trump as well. So what's the history here? And what's the U.S. taxpayer owing for all this?
Oh my God! Well, this all plays into what I've been talking about the bubble and the insanity. And so, okay, I do have a little history for you. So to put this in perspective, in 2009, the Obama Recovery and Reinvestment Act, it was called, was $800 billion. Okay, and then following the 2020 top and the decline into March, in March of 2020, Trump did the CARES Act, which was 2.75 times the size of Obama's $800 billion, which at that time, I reiterate, was the largest stimulus spending package in history. And the one that Trump passed in March 2020, the CARES Act was 2.75 times that at 2.2 trillion. Then in December 2020, that was followed by another 2.3 trillion. Then that was called the government funding bill. Then in March of 2021, Biden did another 1.9 trillion in the so-called American Recovery Plan. And then a couple of days ago, the one you were referring to, I think the number I heard was 1.22 trillion. And these numbers, it seems like they are subject to change a little bit, but 1.2 trillion. And so if my math is right, I penciled this in real quick, but that brings us, since the so-called COVID fiasco, that brings us to $7.6 trillion. $7.6 trillion in so-called stimulus in what, 20 months or so? And then I had the TV on in the background, and the very next day after this latest, what I say was called the infrastructure bill plan was passed, and they're wanting to pass another 1.85 trillion, the so-called Build Back Better plan, by the end of the year. So, that's going to take us to well over $9 trillion in less than a year. Less than 2 years.
Oh, or just 9 Elon Musks.
Yeah. Oh my God. So it's insanity. But this plays into, let's go back a couple of episodes ago, I talked about this. We talked about what is a trillion. And in case somebody doesn't know, it's hard to fathom. You go, well, it's, you look at the zeros, but that doesn't mean anything. So to put a trillion in perspective, and you can do the math. I just got on a spreadsheet, or you can Google it and find the answer too to fact check this. But, to do the math, assuming 365 days in a year and just leaving it simple at that, a trillion seconds is 31,710 years. And so they've passed, like I said, 7.6 trillion so far. And, to put this into perspective, well, let me back up. Before I go there, let me say this another way. I've equated this to the South Sea bubble. in that the South Sea Bubble was a scheme to continue the expansion of debt for England in the 1720s, in 1720. And then finally, they created the South Sea Company, and it allowed them to basically monetize the debt. And the South Sea Company was given rights to do some trading with certain countries or whatever. And anyway, it was a scheme to continue expanding the debt, long and short of it. And this was sold to the public as a good idea. I did a little research, and I found that as of 1904, the dollar value of that debt at that time was like $150 million. And looking back at it, let me just clarify something, not to be confusing, but in 1720, I saw the estimate of between 30 and 50 million pounds, but it's hard to get. I mean, what's in 1720 dollars? I mean, pounds. How do you equate that to, to dollars of today? So to do that, I had an old encyclopedia, and it talked about the South Sea Bubble. And as of 1904, they'd already done that for us. So as of 1904, they said it was an equivalent of $150 million. Well, $150 million, it's easy enough to equate that to 2021 dollars, and it comes to 4.6 billion. So the South Sea Bubble at 4.6 billion, and the current federal debt at 28.5 trillion. This debt bubble is 6,165 times the size of the South Sea Bubble debt. I mean, it's staggering. And to look at it another way, I said a trillion seconds is 31,000. Where's my number? 31,000 whatever, 710 years. The 28 trillion in seconds is like 900. Where's the number? 903,000, almost a billion. Almost a million years at the rate of a second equals a dollar. 900. There it is. 903,729 years. If you equate a second to a dollar. In relation to our current $28.5 trillion debt. It's staggering.
Now, obviously, a number like that is, in real terms, unpayable.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so, a couple of questions, or a couple of comments, observations, and it's just, I mean, hell, it's common sense at this point. You're right. It is unpayable. There's no way. There's no way. And there's also no way that they know that it's unpayable. And so from that perspective, what's another trillion? What's another 10 trillion? What's another 20 trillion? What difference does it make? And so, the only conclusion I can draw is that, I think that they're just, it's just like the South Sea Bubble. It's an effort to try to hold it together as long as possible. And then when it goes, and it's the end of the system. The South Sea Bubble, if you research it, the debt was never paid. And, somebody's going to be responsible. Somebody's going to pay. And that somebody is the public and the nations that are indebted. And it's going to forever enslave, I think the people and the countries are going to be left holding the debt, and they're going to be indebted to this interest for forever. I mean, like you said, how do you pay it? They're not going to forgive it.
Now, we know about the South Sea Bubble, but also why did Scotland, and the Scots hate the English, and I think they still do to this day, why did they join England back in the early 1700s? Well, I believe it's because they had invested a load of money in populating Panama, and after yellow fever and malaria decimated the settlers, they were so short of money, they had to join England to help repay their debts. So this kind of a collapse has happened before, and unwanted political unions have happened because of this. So in history, these bubbles never end well. What's your scenario for this? Or will this money train just continue forever? No one will ever expect the U.S. to pay their debt. China's never going to pay their debt.
No, nothing continues forever. Every bubble, I go back to the simple statement I've made, since we've been talking. It was a bubble a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago. Now it's just, it's a bigger bubble, and it just keeps being blown and blown and blown because, the insanity, they've done a masterful job at keeping this thing going. I mean, they have. There's no doubt. I mean, but it's gone on. You know, every valuation method, every statistical norm, everything has been so distorted in this process. You know, I mean, we've been in no man's land, and it just keeps going. And eventually, I mean, one or two things has to happen. They lose control, or they stop and let it go. You know, one or the other, but it's going to go. Now, and like I said, the danger of this, people don't even realize, you know, that it's really double-sided in the sense that you're going to have, one, you're going to have the drop in the collapse in asset prices, because that's what happens when bubbles pop. And when I say asset prices, I mean everything. You know, housing prices. What we're seeing with, you know, collectibles, with equities. I mean everything. I think what we saw, the deflationary forces we saw in 2009, are just a picnic compared to what we face when this happens. But then the other side of it that no one is looking at is the debt's not going to collapse. It's going to still be there, and therein lies the problem. And I think, to your point, where I see this going is that, you know, I think it's going to be, to use the words that's being tossed around so much now, a great reset. But that doesn't mean the debt's going away. I think, like you said, it's going to be maybe some, how did you say it a minute ago? Some political unions. It's going to be some restructuring. I don't know. I don't know. But it's not good. And inevitably the debt has to be dealt with.
Yeah, right. And the U.S. politically right now, the red and blue states have so many divergent political views. Do you see the U.S. breaking up and China and Russia both rubbing their hands in glee? Nothing would be better for them than the disunited states of America.
Well, I don't know about a breakup, but I tell you what I could see is, you know, you're right. I mean, and I don't know that if it's just America, but, you know, this country is so divided. You know, imagine if we really had, and, you know, we can get out on a limb speculating on this, which is what we're doing, but, you know, imagine if the real crap hit the fan with that sort of a collapse, and we're already having the shortages, supply chain issues and so forth that we're having now. Imagine a financial collapse like that with, you know, the resulting supply chain shortages and, you know, I mean, it would affect everything at that point. And then you have, you know, 350 million pissed off, hungry people that are desperate. I mean, it can go bad quick.
Right. And of course, Americans are well armed. If the ballot box didn't do it, everybody with their 5 or 6 AK-47s and AR-15s and whatever else you have, your bird hunting guns, this could be very messy.
Well, what I see is is the violence. I mean, I saw a movie once, and where my mind goes, and like I said, we are out on a limb on this, but where my mind goes is, let's say something like that happens, since we're there. And this was, I forget what it was called. It's called American Blackout or something like that. The History Channel did it, I believe. And, you know, day one, the lights go out, and no big deal. And, you know, day 2, day 3, and I don't remember the escalation, but by 4 or 5 days, you know, everybody was caught flat-footed, and all of a sudden they had nothing. They were hungry, and when people got hungry and desperate, and there's no power, and they can't feed their kid, and on and on and on and on, then, you know, all of a sudden it was the crime. And you're right, people are armed in the U.S., and that crime, you know, good people turn bad, and then it was a free-for-all. And so that's the kind of thing, you know, I mean, that's extreme thinking, but, you know, if you look at, I forget what country it was now, I'm drawing a blank, but I was looking, there was a collapse of it was back in the summer, and I was looking at the pictures, and they said there was people, we talked about it, I'm just drawing a blank on where it was, but they were having power outages. There was people in SUVs and Mercedes, it said, in line just trying to get a bag of rice and something to eat and bread. They couldn't get bread. I mean, it was bad. And so that's the kind of thing, I mean, that's, you know, it's extreme thinking, but that's the kind of bubble we're dealing with.
We'll have more with Tim Cyclesman Wood right after this.
Don't miss out. Stay informed. Receive the HowStreet.com weekly recap, with thought-provoking podcasts, radio, and articles delivered to your inbox. Sign up for the HowStreet.com weekly recap on our homepage at HowStreet.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Tim Cyclesman Wood. Well, having done Apocalypse almost now, let's take a look at cryptocurrencies. Bitcoin, I've noticed, has fallen from anywhere from 62,000 to 56.9 thousand. Is Bitcoin in for rough times as well if things get bad?
Well, I maintain that if things do really get bad, and let me digress for a minute. Remind me to come back to Bitcoin, but we got out on the limb talking about the size of the bubble. Let me explain what took us there. What took me there, okay. Or I guess took us there. Well, I guess our minds were thinking alike. We just kind of went there. I'm not making any dire predictions like that, but the point is that we're dealing with something so vast, and in reading about the South Sea bubble, that's exactly what happened. The crime, the desperation, the financial ruin, and one thing leads to the next, it leads to the next, it leads to the next, and the fact that, this is so vast, I guess in my thinking, you're somewhat naive if you don't at least think about that. And so I didn't come on the show to talk about that. I didn't even have it on my radar screen. It just kind of happened. But, the point is that this is very, very, very extreme, and the things that they're doing to keep it going, while in the short term it's keeping it going and keeping things at bay, at some point it's not going to work. And we don't know when that is. The key, I think, is the stock market. And when it goes, I think it all goes. And the key there is structure in my world. Now, back to Bitcoin. Again, once it goes, it goes. I don't, let's say you had, some sort of I don't know. If things go bad, like I was looking at in that one country, hell, they didn't even have power because of the collapse. So what good's your Bitcoin if you don't have the internet? You don't have a Bitcoin at that point. And so, and when the liquidation begins, that even aside, I think it's obviously going to be across the board and everything. So, I view Bitcoin, just like every other asset class. It's a tradable asset. Just like, antiques or collectibles or stocks or commodities or anything else, when the liquidation begins, it's all going to go. You asked specifically about Bitcoin. I have an intermediate term sell signal on Bitcoin right now. So for what that's worth.
Mm-hmm. Of course, I don't think cryptocurrencies are going to go away, but governments do want to regulate it. And of course, we all know that famous joke, "We're the government, we're here to help," is the worst thing you can ever hear.
Right. And I'm not being negative against cryptocurrencies. I agree with you. I don't think they're going away. They're probably here to stay. In fact, it may be a new wave of the future. I'm just saying it is an asset, and when things deflate, they all deflate. And I'm also saying is that, at least with a credit card, or, well, hell, you can't even process a credit card today if you don't have the internet. So I'd have to take that back. But if you got a dollar bill in your pocket, you can at least have a medium of exchange, but then the person at the store, they're not going to be able to take your dollar because they wouldn't have, I don't know. At least hard currency, you have something physical in your hand, I guess is my point.
Right, and gold and silver, same thing. If you have a gold coin, although you might have to make pieces of 8 of it, and it would still each piece be worth $400, $500.
Exactly, yeah. But it's an asset in your hand. Yeah. Exactly.
You can trade that always in a disaster, and silver's more interchangeable. And with governments trying to control Bitcoin, we had China officially ban Bitcoin trades. Now they're rethinking it because there are so many assets wrapped up in it, so much money. And the energy to mine those Bitcoins, well, places like Canada and the U.S. have a lot of natural gas. In Alberta, they're using disused natural gas wells as a source of power now to mine Bitcoin. In North Vancouver, it's the first city that's taking the heat from the servers to help heat office buildings. So the heat from mining Bitcoin isn't wasted. there are ways to do things in a creative way. The human mind is very creative given the chance or given desperation. Necessity, the mother of invention?
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah. So, but still, you're taking a look at that particular cryptocurrency. It's on shaky ground right now.
Yeah, it is. And again, I'm not being negative toward Bitcoin. I agree with you about, like I said, I'll just reiterate because make somebody mad that I'm not. I agree. It's not going away, but it's just like everything else. It's gonna move with all the other asset classes and everything. I've said all along, since the advance out of the 2020 low began, and God knows I didn't think it would that we'd see equities blow up like we have. But I do think that it's all pushing up into, a major top together. And when we get to that major top, in my world, if there's a 4-year cycle, when we get to that point, then that's going to be a real dicey spot where, yes, it could tip the bubble. It could prick the bubble. Absolutely. And then the other stuff we got into that didn't even mean to talk about. I mean, is that possible? Well, yeah. Will it happen? I don't know. But, you interrupt supply chains like we've already seen, and people can't get medicines or food or fuel or whatever. I mean, I saw, just in trying to make people think, there was a hurricane 2 years ago in South Louisiana. I mean, this is just a hurricane. I mean, I say just a hurricane. What I'm saying is it's a known temporary condition where you don't have fuel, and you're inconvenienced. It's not a big deal. The cavalry's coming. It's just not a thing. And yet the crime I watched because I had family over there, and the crime was insane. I just sat back and took note, listening to the stories, talking to my family that was there. One couple had an intruder in their house. They left to go get fuel. They came back, and they were both killed when they walked in their house because somebody went in their house to try to get something from them that they just decided to go burglarize their house. They walked in on it. My father-in-law had people snooping around his place trying to steal stuff, trying to steal generators, trying to steal the connections for the generators and pilfer. The crime went crazy, and that's just with a hurricane. And so that was the mindset, I guess, that was floating around in the back of my head. And you get a real unknown crisis of unknown duration going on. Yeah, it could get bad. It could get bad.
Well, here in Vancouver, we are surrounded by floodwaters. The city barely has a road going down to the U.S. We are effectively cut off from Canada by floodwaters that have severed the Trans-Canada highway, the major highway that stretches across Canada just north of the U.S. border. Our rail lines to the east have been washed out by major flooding. It may take weeks or months to get everything back up and running right now. The Trans-Canada at this very moment is being traveled by people in power boats.
But let me guess.
Yes. So,
let me guess.
Yeah, go ahead.
Let me guess, though. In Canada, I would be disappointed where you're at for you to tell me otherwise, but let me guess. Nobody's acting a fool. There's no crime. There's none of that nonsense like I just talked about going on in Canada, right?
Not that we know about. No,
Yep.
It's not. There isn't overt gun violence or anything. Neighbors are helping each other out. Now, in past disasters, fires, yes, there are a couple of miscreants who will sneak in, but it's not widespread looting, and it's something that in Canada, when you do hear about it, you're outraged, shocked, stunned, and outraged, because it's so totally rare here in a disaster.
Exactly. And you said looting, and it made me think about New Orleans when Katrina hit. I mean, we've all seen those pictures.
Well, why did it take the government so long to land the National Guard? They waited, 2 weeks?
No, I don't think it was 2 weeks, but it was a while. It was
a long time.
And I don't remember now the details, but I know that it got bad quick. And again,
and I know I interviewed Vancouver firefighters who went to New Orleans to help out, and their first day out in a boat, they came under gunfire and had to go back to the fire station, and they were there to help.
Yep, and that just plays into my point again. That's what we're dealing with. If it ever goes bad, and it's like a friend of mine used to say, it's not going to matter till it matters, and it's going to matter a lot.
Tim, it's always fun chatting with you. And if anybody's wondering about Vancouver, the city itself is fine, but the breadbasket of BC, where all of our dairy and poultry come from, is underwater right now. People have been forced to release their horses, cattle, and chickens, and they're fending for themselves the best they can. In some places, people have volunteered their boats, and they're helping cows and horses swim across the swollen floodplains. And this is not an exaggerated emergency. And if the rest of Canada and a lot of the U.S., a lot of your goods are shipped through Vancouver as well from China and Japan and the rest of Asia. You talk about supply chain problems. The ships, the container ships that are parked right here in front of my house, where I live, I overlook part of the port. And they won't be able to unload after a while because there are no trains running or trucks that can take those products, those containers, to the rest of the country. So it's going to pile up here. You may be able to celebrate Christmas sometime in July.
There you go. And, to that point, we're still dealing with, not to drag this interview on, but look, just think about it. We're still dealing with the supply chain issues in the States. I don't know about where you're at. I mean, maybe you guys aren't seeing that. I got some friends overseas. I've talked to them, and they're saying not so much. So, I mean, maybe that's just their location, that it's not a big deal. But, here, building supplies, certain things are it's better in some respects. In some respects, it's not. Some of the electrical supplies and that sort of thing. I mentioned before, just getting spark plugs for something was a challenge. So, you have these issues already ongoing, and then you combine it with something else bigger, and it could really cause some problems, was the point.
And I'll tell you how the supply chain works. I ordered some slippers. They were made in China, and I'm actively tracking them. They're then on a cargo ship. The cargo ship comes to Vancouver. The container is unloaded. The slippers are then put in a warehouse in Surrey, BC, which is a suburb of Vancouver. Then they were put on a train, sent to a warehouse in Toronto, which is, 3,500 miles away. Then put on another train, then put into a warehouse in Richmond, which is by the Vancouver airport, where the Vancouver airport is, and then eventually on a truck to the store. So once it arrived in Canada from China, it was still another 3-week adventure. That's how our supply chains work. Man, it was in Vancouver 3 times before I got it.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. So those are the kind of problems that hopefully will be cleared up. But as long as we work on a just-in-time world and nobody wants to build things in North America and let Asia build everything for us, I think these supply chain things are going to last a long, long time.
Well, and that was, I guess, the whole point. But, and the other thing is, as far as the market, we talked about a whole lot of stuff other than that. But, as far as the market, I go back to, back in August, we did have some cycles trying to bite. It wasn't the best setup in the world, but and consequently it didn't stick. And, that's the thing. Eventually, it's one of these cyclical crossroads. I've talked about that before too. And you come to these, technical junctures where, it's like an intersection. It's an opportunity for a turn. Doesn't mean you have to. But one of these, setups is going to bite and it's going to turn. And when that structure sticks and we see it, we're going to see it. And we're going to know, just like we did at the 2020 top. And then that's the time to go, okay, we better take caution here, because I'm telling you, when it bites, when it sets up, it's going to go quick. That's the way it always happens with these things. And that's the beauty and importance, I think, of understanding the structure of the markets.
What are the things that you would be looking for? Would we have much warning sign that, okay, that's it, the stock market's going to be like a downhill skier going real fast downhill?
Well, again, I don't know how, it's the structure. I mean, every little setup is a little different. Once it cracks, it goes fast, and that was, I guess, one of the warnings. I digress a little bit in this, but, it tried to stick, it began to set up. We had real structure in place in August. We had a Dow 309 confirmation. We had some other things fall in place. I had some cyclical structure I needed to see. It wasn't all the way there, but it was a toehold, if you will, on a turn. but then it took a while. It just didn't, and the fact that it took a while and then it just kind of morphed away and didn't stick. But what I'm saying is when the real turns come, they set up pretty quick and bada bing, bada boom, and they don't fool around. And so, and I think that typically they're pretty subtle. They're sneaky. And so again, just like the 2020 top, that was a very subtle setup, but by understanding the structure, I mean, it was documented in the letter. We saw it. And I'm telling you, I think that's the thing I struggle with every day is understanding where we are with the structure, knowing exactly where we're at so that if something does, when something does break, if something breaks, I say when it breaks, that I understand where we're at structurally so that I know what's going on.
Tim, thank you so much for chatting with us.
Thank you.
My guest has been Tim Cyclesman Wood, editor of Cycles News and Views on cyclesman.com. And by the way, when people said they had no warning whatsoever of the March collapse in 2020, Tim gave us a 2-week warning on it. You said it was going to happen, so stay tuned to us and to Tim. He can give you the heads up. I'm not kidding. So there can be warning if you listen to the right people. If you have any questions for Tim or any of our other guests, you can send them to info@housestreet.com. Find us on Twitter @HouseStreet. Our YouTube channel is Talk Digital Network.
Comments made
I'm
on
Jim
HouseStreet.com
Thank you
radio
for listening.
are an expression of opinion only and should not be construed in any matter whatsoever as recommendations to buy or sell any financial instrument at any time. Available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. HouseStreet.com radio is a production of House Street Media Incorporated.